If you've never heard of kudzu before, first of all, I am amazed and shocked. Kudzu is one of the most prominent non-native invasive vines in the southeastern United States. It has the ability to completely cover and mat the entire forest and also take down trees. Kudzu is traditionally or originally from its native ranges throughout Asia, where it's a very beneficial plant that has natural predators. But here it doesn't have natural predators and it grows at a really rapid rate. And so it just completely transforms our ecosystem. From a scientific perspective, the most successful response to any non-native invasive coming to an environment is early detection. If we can detect it early and get rid of it early, then the ability for it to spread on a massive scale that feels incomprehensible to remove it from that forest ecosystem is kind of been taken care of at the root, per se. And but to do that, you have to have the knowledge of what kudzu is, and you also have to have the time to be able to go in and remove it as soon as you see it.
My concept is about how kudzu is seen as this invasive, and the way that people would react to kudzu, of this invasive plant that takes over, really reminded me and felt similar to how people reacted to queerness, in the sense that both are seen as invasive and both are seen as nuisances, but they actually have really incredible benefits. Kudzu can be, made into fiber, paper. You can eat it. It's medicinal. There are so many incredible things that you can use with kudzu, and also the history of kudzu in the South is really interesting. People actually were using it a lot before it was deemed as invasive, and then people started to get these more, the government started to use pesticides and herbicides to try and get rid of it. And so the use of kudzu amongst craftspeople kind of started to diminish once it was seen as invasive. But prior to that, it actually had a huge presence here. And a lot of artists are picking that up again and have been for decades.
Being able to identify some of the most common and non-native invasive species is really good. And then also, if you own your home or you're landscaping, don't actively plant non-native invasive species, even though they might look pretty or they might even might produce a fruit or a cherry or something like that. I mean, if you're using it for yourself, that's one thing. But I know, so most wildlife won't identify that non-native cherry as a food source. Only about 20% of the birds might identify it as a food source. Whereas if you plant a native tree, then all of the birds will identify it as a food source that are, fruit-eating birds.
It is often contended that invasive species, we'll use this word invasive saying that the plant is successful, and often it's non-native. These are usually the two criteria for an invasive species, right? Successful and non-native. Don't get me started on what it looks like when we apply that to people. Successful, non-native people. What does that mean? Okay, we should have similar criteria, similar morality when we're thinking about plants, I think. Okay, when you have a non-native successful species that is choking out native species, often people say, this is now our responsibility to step in. It's not our responsibility to step in, it's nature. It's natural. Most species have gone extinct. This is how natural selection works. Everything moves in this way.
I don't know. Instead of saying it's a failure in any one area, I would honestly say it's just a consequence from humans not being as involved in the environment or as intertwined in the environment as we've naturally been in the past. And so we don't watch for and care for our environment in the intuitive, intrinsic way that we once did.
I was in this course called Queer Strategies for Textile Thinking, and I saw this giant mountain of this hillside of kudzu outside of the studio, and I thought, why not try and use this? This is really inspiring me, the way that it was taking up space, the way that it was climbing over everything, the way that it didn't have a distinct orientation, that it was sort of climbing and transforming the landscape, I felt really inspired by that. So I started to grab a bunch of it and I brought it back to the studio. And I really started weaving with it. I was peeling it. I was taking the leaves off. And that was really what kickstarted my huge interest with kudzu. From there, it just really took off. I researched it. I went to local workshops about fiber making, and I did my own research on how to make the fiber from kudzu.
Ecosystems in the southeastern United States have not evolved with kudzu at all. Kudzu was introduced here in the 1940s, 1950s, and so it's a relatively new plant on our landscape, especially when you think about the evolution process. And I would say they most often take over areas of high disturbance. So where like humans have been and disturbed the area. And so oftentimes it's also when there's not like healthy forest there to begin with, and due to human disturbance.
We are essentially saying that plants are not allowed to migrate, or animals are not allowed to migrate outside of our predetermined locations that we think they should be in. We're talking about animals and plants which have had a history over the course of millennia and have certainly migrated during that time. Maybe they haven't moved continents, or maybe they have, who knows. But we're saying that because we've taken a snapshot in time and said this is how the environment looks, we're saying that plants and animals can't migrate now, and if they do migrate, we will carry a genocide out on those plants or animals. We will destroy them. It's problematic. Plants, for instance, some people will argue, don't migrate. You know, they're sessile. They don't move. So it's like, okay, people have moved them into a new environment. Therefore, it's the responsibility of people to take them out of that new environment. Okay? Plants depend on animals in most cases, in nearly all cases, except for wind-dispersed plants. They depend on animals to move them. Humans, also being animals, are part of that ecological process.
Non-native invasive plants are very much a thing. It is a plant that has not evolved within the ecosystem that they're in, and they cause some form of harm. So they can cause economic harm, they can cause ecological harm, or they could cause harm to human health. And that is like the definition of a non-native invasive species that actually causes the world around $480 billion annually. I'll say like from non-native invasive diseases, pests, and insects, we lose 1 in every 4 trees in this country.
There was like a performance I did with this kudzu garment that I had made from the fiber, and I had this huge tarp that I had wheat pasted Bible pages on because I grew up Catholic and went to Catholic school, and crumpled that with my body of this like, I'm like wanting to outgrow this. This is something that's like a part of my past, it's part of my history, but it was so oppressive. And kudzu just like felt like that material of this like resilience, of this keep growing, of this like we're gonna transform this.
If we evaluate the moral compass we are using in order to carry out these projects, let's say, for instance, the project of eradicating kudzu from the American South, okay? The moral compass we are applying to this is, it's a nationalist compass, it's a nativist compass, and inherently, by virtue of what it is a very far right-leaning kind of political opinion. This is something which is bordering on often what people would consider a fascist-type belief system, to say, this plant can't exist here because this plant was not from here 300 years ago, because we're not going to allow this plant to be part of this ecosystem.
There's just like this extreme of the hatred and this extreme of the like people who really want to get to know it. And I think that to me was what was really interesting as a material, that it could invoke that kind of reaction, and how that is so prevalent in our society of queerness, of people who are different, of like what, like I think that kudzu really like brings out our society's fear of what we don't know, and that ultimately turns into this like sort of like othering of that. And I truly believe that kudzu, it's here. I want to make it a part of our society. I want people to use it. And kudzu is this plant that like it takes a lot of energy and time to get to know it. And I think that's really important. Like it takes time and energy to get to know it. You have to slow down. And I think that's really anti-capitalist. And I think kudzu is this incredible plant that can teach us a lot about that.
If you see kudzu out there, take an opportunity to make a spring wreath right now out of it. Take an opportunity to cut it back a little bit. Take an opportunity to educate somebody about it, and go have a little work day and see if you can kind of fight it. It's a great exercise. Like I've always thought, if we could just get all the people that do CrossFit, if we could just get them on a kudzu patch for like a day or two, we would be done with kudzu. So maybe that'll be my next exercise club idea, actually.